Now, here's Mike Andreula.
Mangione. And we're talking about Zen Spaces. You have a retreat coming up in September 15th,
18th through the 20th.
18th to the 20th, and this is in the Catskills. And one main reason I wanted to have you on, besides everything else we always talk about, is the video I just watched of some guy that goes underneath the ice and then meditates somehow and uses his mind and controls it, and he can also do other superpowers. So is there any way to learn how to do any of these or to deconstruct how is it a breathing thing? Is it a meditation thing?
Well, I think it's probably a combination of those things. I'll be straight, I haven't actually watched the video specifically yet that you're talking about, but the way that you describe it, I think it has a lot to do with definitely mind control, and breath is a direct access to that.
Okay.
Now, the question with that is, for example, in the case of this video, how far can you take controlling your mind, right? There's little bite-sized chunks of that. For example, you're starting a meditation practice where something as simple as by learning to control your breath, you can calm down your nervous system. That's one end of the spectrum. You've got somebody who is literally controlling all their fight or flight responses, their homeostasis by being in frozen water. That's like the other end of the continuum. But I think anything is possible, so yeah.
I did try a little bit of it, and I was at the beach. I had just watched the video, so I tried to replicate it because the water was pretty cold. I nearly passed out. I got so lightheaded because I was just, and then I went in the water. My mind was occupied on how lightheaded it was instead of how cold the water was.
Okay.
I'm sure this isn't uncommon. There used to be documentaries on Tibetan monks that would take wet blankets and then meditate all night, and they would be steaming.
Yeah.
So there's a way to control your body temperature.
Absolutely.
But it's just fascinating to me that this is even possible. This is something that gives me a lot of hope that breathing, something anyone can access, can actually make you feel or actually be able to overcome a lot of problems in life. One problem is diet. Like if you get sick, your breathing can possibly help you. Do you have any insight to this, since you do run?
Yeah, since I do healing work as one of my practices. It talks a lot about the connection between the body and the brain. That, and illness, for example, that, take, for example, the case of how the mind and stress, it's a physiological response that's often thought-driven. So if you can begin to train your mind about what you're actually focusing on, you can start to alter that basically stress, negative in the body response. And I've seen in cases where it prevents illness, and it also can turn illness around. But a lot of that too is getting to the root of what's your stressor cause. Is it your environment? Is it things in your life you're not happy about? So I think they're so intimately connected that you need to dig a little deeper about, okay, I'm changing my breathing, but what's going on as I'm changing my breathing? For example, like, is fear coming up? If it's a lot about anxiety, is it repressed anger for a lot of people? Is it deep sadness? Because over time, there's a really fascinating book about this topic, about the connection with the body and the brain, and all these untapped into possibilities. It's called The Molecules of Emotion. And it's written by a Western scientist who was one of the first to discover there's such an intimate connection between actually cellular activity and thought. So you can literally, by changing your thought patterns and your breath, you can start to change your cells in the digestion, in your heart rate. So it's not a surprise when you talk about this kind of seemingly superhuman capacities. I would argue it's a piece of that.
My brother Timmy told me when I was little that that there were scientists that you could have your kid go to or something, and then they would learn how to like move objects with their minds and stuff like that. Obviously, he was lying to me, but
There were studies on that.
I was like,
to see
what?
if kids could do it.
Yeah, the men. The men who stare at goats. I didn't watch the movie, but that was a CIA-funded study because they thought that they could possibly explode goat brains by staring at the goats with psychic energy. Maybe it's more possible than we realize, at least physically controlling the body. Of course, the mind is important when you're working out, and to a certain extent how your life develops, your thought pattern is going to affect everything. So we should probably be training just meditation classes or mindful classes.
Absolutely. Or just, I think, mindfulness in general. You know, it's something that I've noticed in my own life as well as a lot of my students. And, you know, there's such an emphasis on constant thought and activity and busyness. And the opportunity of something like a meditation practice or anything that starts to bring that busyness down is it gets you into a much more fundamental state in your brain, and also too then how the body responds. And that's also not surprisingly where things like your healing response with your cells happens. So you can actually recover faster from an injury, you can recover faster from stress, you know, not to mention your quality of life is better. So I think there's tremendous possibilities with that. Now, I don't think there's also, I don't think there's a solution that's a one-size-fits all for each person.
No, probably not.
No.
But here it's almost mandatory. This is where people really need to work on being in a Zen state, because the city provides so much stimulation that is going to ratchet up stress.
Yeah.
It's almost impossible. And I see it all the time because people always compare themselves to another person, and that's kind of how happy they are.
Yeah.
You know, if you see that you're the only person that has a home, and then you're going to feel like you have a little bit extra. But if you keep comparing yourself to millionaires and, well, I don't have, you know, I don't have a house in Hoboken, I can't afford a house, then you're not going to feel good about that.
Yeah.
So it's just little things like that can build a lot of stress, and just traffic, cars, people, density of population, go a little crazy.
Absolutely.
Bad food and, you know, pollution and dog shit on the floor, Dylan. Parking tickets stuck in the dog shit and cigarette butts and corrupt politicians. You start questioning yourself on what the hell you're doing here in the first place. So you need a lot of Zen type mindset to be brought in, and that's where your studio comes into play.
That's a lot of my intention and why I do what I do. You know, Zen Space is meant to be a place where people discover and engage in different practices. You know, yoga, meditation, dance, what they all have in common is they're a way for you to have a support structure so that you can, even if it's just for an hour, get away from all of that distraction in the outside world. And what that does, I think this is what I've noticed a really important point, is you can train yourself to begin to cultivate a center within you that even if there's other stuff going on around you, it's like the calm inside of the storm.
I need that. I need that calm. Everybody needs that. If you could just have that in your back pocket, create space.
Yeah.
Very hard to do.
Yeah. It's you know, it's like building a muscle. Just like when you work out and incrementally you get stronger and you have good days and bad days. You know, I remember talking to some of the monks who I've practiced with and trained with at this facility in the Catskills where we're doing our retreat next month. And I had this sort of romanticized notion of what it was like to have a practice. You know, I said, you know, it must be blissful. You just sit there and you're in Satori all the time, which is the Buddhist term for like you reach that sort of realization space. And one of the monks, he just looked at me and he was like, "What are you, crazy? We struggle just as much as you do. I just have more practice in it. I have more tools. You know, it's like, just like if I said to you, like, I really want to lift this much, you know, so many pounds. And you might say to me, well, yeah, I can do that, but some days it's easier than others. You just train longer than me. Same thing.
Yeah. Well, I also think it's got to be a little easier since he's in the, no, what is it, monastery?
Yes. Yeah. Well, absolutely. Yes. To your point, I mean, it definitely, there are certain environments that encourage support being in that space.
It's like Ramadas, he's in Hawaii.
Yeah.
He's gonna be a little bit less stressed, but even he'll be honest. There's gonna be problems in paradise at all times.
Sure.
But it's all about perspective.
Absolutely.
And how do you gain that perspective? That's one problem with traveling. Coming back from Italy, I feel like not fantastic. You know, I feel like there's a lot of things we don't have in our daily life here that they have.
Yeah.
And it's not just about being on vacations, that these things are just not in this culture.
Yeah.
And this culture is goes towards completely antisocial things, phones and the same thing everybody says, but there's no relaxing, sitting back, having a spritz, having some tramezzini, which are little sandwiches with the bread crust cut off, stuffed with prosciutto.
Yeah.
You know, having gelaterias, Dylan. You don't understand they built that. Get your shit together, America. I mean, that should be it. We should definitely be a little bit more laid back and enjoy life in the U.S. a bit more.
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, this is a great thing. You know, I don't know if there's an answer, but it's something as an individual inquiry about, as much as you can, that you put in structures in your own life that enable that. You know, if you look at the seemingly constant acceleration of the experience and pace of life in our culture. You know, if you look at historically, and Foucault has written about this, that there's the modern episteme. So the 20th century and beyond, it's all about improvement and speeding things up and velocity and advance. And so we've been on this kind of trajectory of things are changing and accelerating and supposedly getting better faster and faster because it's exponentially increasing. But of course, we have to really look at the cost of that, like long term. We have no idea what that does to the quality of human life. You mentioned about technology, that my paradox with this is it seemingly creates connection, but it really disconnects.
It does.
Yeah.
It's not a good thing.
Yeah.
It's bad, a little bit.
I mean,
Except
obviously
for this
there's
podcast.
there's definitely, you know, pros to it in that I can easily reconnect with someone through social media who, before that was invented, I would have never been able to find them. You know, if I'd lost touch with them, like somebody from maybe 20 years ago when I was, you know, living abroad, that kind of thing. But there's a limit in terms of the saturation of how much we can take as human beings. That is not a substitute for, you know, you mentioned about simplicity in your experience. That my mentor Ohashi, who was from Japan, he said we're about human beings, not human doings. And so we've lost the ability to be. And so those simple acts of mindfulness and enjoyment and pleasure are the experience of being.
I feel like if I just be here,
Yeah.
I'll be living in a box. Like, I feel like the society is not geared towards you being as much as you should be able to do. Like, meaning you got to be busy here because there's always an impending something happening.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the way I'm interpreting it.
No, it's in the
structurally
ethers.
built in.
Yeah.
So that's the downsides of capitalism. Like every year your taxes are going up in Hoboken.
Yeah.
Every business's taxes. This is a small point, but everything is gently, the heat is being turned up on you. So you need to be hustling continuously. And I just don't see that ever going away. Maybe it's the city atmosphere, but we definitely are more happy when we're just slowed down.
Yeah.
Like people are sped up so much that they can't even take time in classes to look away from their phone. They want to see what's next and what's coming next.
Yes.
And that is how you torture yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
You have no patience. You don't allow for any discipline at all. You just scratch the itch. It's a real problem.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you guys want to move to Italy or not? I mean, Dylan, you've been all over. Where's the best place ever?
I'm a big fan of Italy, I have to say.
They got it good, right?
Nice good place.
Kristen, where's the best place ever? The Catskills. September.
Well, yes and no. You know, the thing about that is, I think it's about, like, if I could really choose, I wouldn't have it be just one place. Because take the case of the Catskills, for example. It's very distinct, and you probably find this too, having just been in Italy, that, or Costa Rica, for example, that your whole experience of life changes. You know, your day-to-day and how you are inside of it changes for the better, presumably. But if you're talking about actually making that as a full-time, everyday, your new reality, just like Ram Dass said, you know, being in Hawaii, it seems like paradise, but he'll probably tell you there's stuff that still comes up. You know, I have friends who live in Kona, Hawaii, and they say the same thing. You know, it's not and that's I think that's the paradox of reality. Now, it's not. I'm not advocating for like, well, we're just stuck. That's not the case at all.
Dog the Bounty Hunter.
Yeah.
Dog the Bounty Hunter show was in Hawaii, and like, I was like, what part of Hawaii is this? And it was like people on crystal meth and this crazy guy, but apparently there's parts of Hawaii that have been ruined.
Yeah. But I mean, my point is that. For me, I think it's about finding balance. That you can have this idea that somewhere it's like the grass is always going to be greener. There's a utopia, and it's not to say don't seek out something else if what you have doesn't work for you. But also, nothing is perfect, and that's okay. And it's beautiful that we have the chance to do many things. You know, a lot of us in our lives that we can take that time out of so-called normal life. Like for me with the Catskills, like I lived there for 2 summers. Now having done that, I can say like I wouldn't want to live there full time. Realistically, no. Not having had that experience because I hit that. Yeah, no, there are pieces that are missing.
Yes.
But that counterbalance between the two, that I can go there even just for an overnight. I was there last week, and it restored for me something that was missing. The same thing when I go back in September.
Travel is education.
Completely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Completely.
So do you want to show us some secret agent breathing techniques so I can go in ice water?
I don't know about the ice water part.
How can someone out there just be able to control their emotions in a minute?
Oh, wow.
Is there any techniques we can give them?
Yeah, you know, this is one of my favorites, and I use this with my students all the time. It's really simple. It's called counting the breaths, which is from Zen Buddhist practice, and it's one of the first things that I was given by my teacher, a master, who it's meant to begin to quiet the mind by giving yourself something else to focus on.
Okay.
So the game with this is you're gonna silently for yourself count the inhales and the exhales.
Okay.
But the game with this, and you have to think of it as a game because really it's about noticing how challenging this can be, is each time you take an inhale and an exhale, so let's say I do, and then silently I would say 1. And then I'm going to do that again, right? And the point is you're going to see if you can get all the way up to 10, but the game is every time your mind wanders, you have to go back to 1.
Okay. That's a good game, actually.
Yeah.
So you don't count the time in and out. You count. That's 1.
Correct.
Breathe in, breathe out. And
Yes.
your goal is to get up to 10?
Up to 10 breaths, yes.
Okay.
But like I said, each time you notice that there's a stray thought, a distraction, something else shows up, wherever you are in your counting cycle, just reset at 1. And it's really interesting. I've done this with my students more recently, and there are some classes where I don't get past 2.
Really?
Yeah.
Damn.
Not to be discouraging, but rather just to give a context of our brains are hardwired not to be quiet.
Yes.
And that's okay. As long as we're not in an argument with that, half the battle is won.
Okay.
You know, I see too many people who, they like the idea of meditation and then they realize, oh my gosh, this is really hard. I can't do it. No, it's not about that. It's, you know, I say this with all compassion, that it's about being okay with that. Sometimes it's not easy. That's where the strength gets developed. And that's beautiful. Doesn't that make sense?
That does make sense, and I need to practice it more. I like that idea. 1, 2.
Yeah. and there's a dear friend of mine. He actually lived up at the center, up in the monastery up in the Catskills. He was an American Italian, actually. He's been to Italy many times. And he ended up living up at the Zendo, the facility, for over a year. And we were talking informally during one of the intensives, what they call session, which is 7 days of 13 hours a day sitting. I mean, broken up, but in interviews with the teacher, with the Roshi privately. And he said, I was so proud. I went in and I talked to Roshi and I said, I got all the way up to 10. And he goes, great, do it again. So it's just like completely like, you realize like, wait, there's nowhere to get to.
No.
I mean, that's the other thing too, is it's like a shift in, we're thinking in red. And this is about seeing in indigo.
Okay. I get that.
You know, it's like
It's a different
yes,
filter.
it's a different filter, and that's you know, I love that. I so love in the students who come to me that there's this leap of, I don't know, but I'm willing to see what it's like to try to switch the filter. It's one of the most amazing things to see. Because it's, you know, I will be the first one to say, like, it can be easy and it can sometimes not be easy.
Yeah, 24 minutes. So, Kristen, promo the hell out of this Catskills so that they can get a real life break and some tools to come back and be more present, to create space to deal with challenges.
Well, as you said, we are doing this is our 3rd annual weekend retreat, and it's 3 hours north of New York City. It is at what's called Daibozatsu Zendo, which is a traditional Japanese Rinzai Zen, which Rinzai Zen is actually the samurai tradition of Zen Buddhism. So by that, it's a little more distinct than what's called the Soto or plain style, which was for the citizens. And the opportunity of this is, one, you're completely removed from your normal life. So you're 2 miles up a mountain at the northwest corner of the Catskill Preserves, 3 hours north of New York City, in a very remote, beautiful, pristine location, surrounded by a lake and wildlife and real quiet, like real quiet. And you know, one of the women who's co-leading with me this time, she's actually Japanese. And what was interesting was I took her there last week because she wanted to see it beforehand. And she said, you know, I cannot remember the last time I actually got to be in real quiet as I sat down and meditated. She lives in New York City. So that's, right there, is a huge opportunity for people. It's from Friday afternoon to Sunday. So it's very condensed in terms of really, if you're, you know, with scheduling it, we make it sort of as amenable as possible because people are very busy. We also include practices like yoga. I lead something in addition to the Zen meditation. The traditional meditation is part of their practice. So that's available, as well as the Zen Moves meditation practice, which I do, which we've done as part of our boot camps before, where it's body awareness based. So I like to joke that it's a way in for people to begin to experience meditation that's a little easier.
Yes.
Than what we were just talking about.
For super hyper people, it's definitely the best way to do it.
Yeah, it's specifically focusing on the body. I'd say the other piece of it too is that for some people it's not only the opportunity to get away, but it can be a time to really begin to slow down and dig a little deeper in terms of like, what do you want next? And something as simple as I've had participants who have come and said, I need some space around my job or my relationship, and this is a kind of a neutral, very pure environment where my thinking gets clearer, I'm not distracted, and I can begin to sort of listen to what's in my heart. And that, for some people, like, that's a huge opportunity.
Very necessary.
Yeah.
So where can they go to a website? Zen
Yeah, so they can go to zenspacestudios.com, and registration is currently open, and we're limiting it, so I definitely encourage people to go immediately. All you need to do is fill out the application form. It's got all the information as far as logistics, travel. As I said, it's very close to New York City. It's accessible also by public transportation. We take care of everything. We take care of you as far as we give you an orientation when you get there. We match you up with people. All of the accommodations and the meals are included, so it's very simplified. I mean, it's 3 days where you don't have to think so hard about being in life. And you're going to be challenged in other ways.
Do you beat people there?
Oh, you're talking about the Kisaku stick.
They don't.
No, let me talk about that for a second. So I believe what you're talking about is this is part of some Buddhist traditions and martial arts traditions. In Zen Buddhism, they have what's called the Kisaku stick.
Yeah.
And this comes from, as far as I know, Japanese tradition, where you'll be sitting in a meditation and one of the teachers or senior students will actually come around and you lean forward and they whack you on the back with the stick. Yes, I've actually had this. I've experienced this. Now, number one, in this particular setting, they don't do that anymore.
Okay.
We now have, no. And so one, it's not an issue any longer. And two, the way it's always been practiced at this particular monastery was you were a choice. So even though they would come around with the Kisaku stick, you were given instructions that if you wanted to participate, you would do what's called gasho, which is palms together, and you would indicate, and it wasn't like, I want to torture myself. Yeah. It was, I get to move, because with, ideally the goal is you're sitting still as a way to quiet the mind, so you actually get to like stretch a little bit, and two, it like reverberates through your muscles. So all that's like, it opens everything up, and it feels amazing. But you don't have to.
Yeah.
It's not. Yeah.
No, I think it's, you can pay extra and get. Some people need to get. Can I recommend a wiffle ball bat?
And the other thing too, it's interesting with the Japanese tradition, because I remember when Edo Roshi, who was the founder, and he trained with masters in Japan, and he's just part of this incredible lineage, and and he was just this like force of nature. I could feel his energy when he would walk past me. It was that strong. And when he was leading a session one time, I was like, no, I got to do this. Like, it's Roshi, for Christ's sake. And what was so cool was in Zen, there's this thing about wake up, stop deluding yourself, wake up, be present to what is right now. And all the rest is just mind garbage. Like cut through to its core. And it's not meant as a reprimand, it's meant to encourage you. Because inside of that, what I found is it gives you a mental clarity that as human beings we don't always have access to. So it makes you stronger.
I agree.
You know, it's like cut through the delusions. Like, just stop it. Which, when you're sitting for 45 minutes, like, your mind just goes in all these crazy places.
Yeah, it definitely
You know?
works.
Yeah.
Well, guys, I think that's what we got film-wise today. So if you need to, please contact me at michaelandrula.com, and your email will probably never get answered. If you want to go there, you can also go to facebook.com. You can go to google.com and type in Dylan. But is there any place for them to find you, Kristen?
They can go to zenSpaceStudios.com, directly to the website.
Cool.
They can also find me on Twitter at ZenMoves, where I do things like guided meditations recorded. I'm on
Very,
iTunes
very good, yes.
under Kristen Mangione.
Nice.
I have quite a number of now, a growing
Nice.
number of, like, you know, they're short too. They're bite-sized. They're like 10 minutes.
Definitely
Podcasts, guided meditation to get you into that practice. We also have a Facebook page, Zen Space Studios. So you can find us in any of those places.
Pushing and believing. So you keep on pushing. Guys, that was the most relaxed. Every time Kristen talks, I start going into the zone. And then, which is a good thing,
Yeah,
right?
I get it.
Imagine a whole week of that. Go get the podcast, guys. You're gonna enjoy it. You're gonna. What's the podcast name? On iTunes?
It's on iTunes. It's under my name, Kristen Mangione.
Cool. And hit me up on Facebook. I honestly will answer some questions on Facebook, and you'll be able to see the Italian trip. You'll be able to see what we were talking about. We went into a pizzeria called Set the Test Day, and he basically gives me a little taste of everything and shows this new pizza making procedure they do. And they took out a bottle of grappa, like this big, gigantic, and they busted out old Prosecco bottles for me. Thought I was famous or something.